Good day. Today I will be demonstrating the basic kind of the how to set up your BDP and the kind of general usage of its web interface, its main method of control. The quick start guide should be able to provide you with enough information to get to this point, that is to open up your web browser and to identify the IP address that has been assigned to your BDP, which should bring up the dashboard. So the first thing I think we'll go over is audio devices. So this will be a setting that if you want to make use of a USB DAC, or you have a BDP1 USB and you can only make use of a USB DAC, this will essentially be the kind of the area you need to be in. So here, audio devices, to set up your DSD capable DAC, and to kind of troubleshoot if you're not getting any kind of audio, to make sure that the USB DAC is being seen. So in this case, because it's a BDP2, we have the internal ESI Juliet card that shows up twice. One is the analog interface, and the second is the digital interface that we actually make use of. And in this case, I have two USB DACs plugged in, a PS Audio DAC and a BDA2 DAC. Now, both these USB DACs are highlighted in red, and the reason for that is that the BDP sees these DACs here, but because I plugged them in after I turned on the BDP, they're not actually in the configuration file for playback. So in this case, they're not going to play anything because they're not in the configuration file, but the BDP is seeing them. If the BDP is not seeing your USB DAC, there's two things you should try doing. First, check your DAC's manual to see if it makes use of multiple different versions of the USB audio protocol. Some USB DACs, most recently actually had to troubleshoot a benchmark DAC, which support both USB 2 and 1.1. The customer had it in USB 1.1 mode, so after switching it back to the 2.0 mode, it started showing up. If that's not the case, or that doesn't resolve the issue and still not showing up, you should simply try power cycling the USB DAC, just turning it off and back on. Also keep in mind, some USB DACs, the USB portion, will also be powered over USB. So when you do power cycle it, also unplug the USB cable and plug it back in. So this BDP2 is seeing these two USB DACs. So I'm going to simply restart MPD, and these two DACs are now in here. Now the PS Audio, as I mentioned before, is DSD capable. So what I'm going to do is there's this checkbox here, and basically any USB DAC that you have that's DSD capable, if you check it off and then click apply, again, it's done. The BDP now knows that it will do DSD. Now, next to each output device are these disable buttons. Clicking this button will prevent the BDP from making use of that audio device. So I've just clicked the Bryston USB DAC, and the button's gone to enabled, meaning that this USB DAC is disabled. If I click it again, it re-enables it, making use of it. So that should pretty well cover the audio device's setup. The next thing to look at will probably be music player daemon settings. This is the core piece of playback software. You will need to enter in the username and password to access this page. They're both Bryston, all lowercase. Realistically, the only thing in here you may want to consider changing is the MPD version, and realistically you'll probably only want to change that if you intend on playing back DSD. So there's 3 versions included, only 2 of which will work with the BDP-1, and that the BDP-1 USB is lumped in with the BDP-1. Version 0.17.6 supports up to DSD-64. 18.21 supports up to DSD-128, and although we haven't had a chance to test it because we don't have any hardware available yet, 19.9 will support up to DSD-512. And again, only the BDP2 will be able to make use of 19.9. As far, well, in the how the firmware currently functions. This particular unit is running testing S2.17. So if you're running S2.16 and you see a feature in here that's not in yours, it will be introduced in S2.18. So I'm just going to leave that alone. Yeah, so maximum playlist length, we set by default to 300. If you want it to be larger, that's basically saying how long, not how many songs the BDP can see, but how many songs you can have in the current playlist. And we'll go into the current playlist momentarily. This option here, when you turn the BDP on, if this option is on, the BDP will look for any changes in your music library. By default, this is on. If you don't want that to occur, just turn it off, and it will no longer do that. This function here is mostly deprecated at this point, so really there shouldn't be any reason to have it on anymore. This here will allow the BDP to track what music you listen to, and will kind of generate a your own personalized top 40 playlist. And the last.fm will just log whichever songs it is that you're listening to on your BDP with last.fm. And with your last.fm account, if you log into their website, it'll make suggestions on audio to or new music you might be interested in. Okay, the next section we're going to look at is NAS setup. So I do have, this is a BDP2, I do have hard drive installed in the unit and a USB thumb drive plugged in, but if your music is on a NAS or you want to add a NAS to your library, this is where you do it, is the NAS setup. So this is what it should look like when there are no shares attached to the BDP. So we'll go here and add a share. Now it's very careful to pay attention to this kind of status bar here. So whenever the BDP is busy, you'll see that when it's ready, it will state as though it's ready. So in this case, it's got a bunch of devices here. Let's see here. There's my Western Digital cloud. Now, the BDP can connect to both Samba shares and Apple file shares or AFP shares. If you can select an SMB share or a Windows share, that is definitely preferable over the AFP shares. The SMB or Samba or Windows file sharing, we've been working on that for a lot longer than the AFP stuff, so it's a lot more reliable. So we're going to select that one. So in this case, it's already selected that it's a Microsoft Windows network. It's already given the name and entered in the IP address. If your NAS isn't listed in here, you can still type in the information manually. So in this case, we do have a username and password. Oops. And so I've entered in my username and my password to access this NAS. And I'm going to click Next. And there it is. It's busy again. Basically what it's doing is it's taking my username and password and trying to log into the NAS to find out what network shares are available. So in this case, these are the network shares. So I'm going to select Chris. I'm going to... Oh wait, Chris? No, that's silly of me. No. I'm going to start over. So let's go back to Home. Add share. Because I haven't refreshed the page, my username and password remain in here. So let's go back here. Yeah, see, there's the AFP share I was talking about. You should avoid that if possible. Hit next. And I want to select music. There we go. And I don't want to add all of this. There's a smaller folder. I think I have a subfolder in here somewhere. Oops. Oh, there it is there. Way at the bottom, MP3. So I'm just going to add this small folder of MP3s, because it's... Each time you connect music to it, it has to scan in the contents. So there it is. It's been added. So while that's updating, we'll go over the Services tab. Now, this page allows you to control the various core services that kind of make the whole thing work, as well as add additional services if you want to use it as it wasn't intended. So the first one listed here, MPD. This is the piece of software that basically handles your music library and the playback of your music library, assuming that is you don't want to use the other streaming-based services. So essentially, assuming you want to use it the way we intended to use it, you'll always keep that on. The BDP also hosts a Samba server. Samba is a form of Windows file sharing. When you select it, it will list off the shares it has created. In this case, one called User, which allows you to access the user space. Realistically, if you're watching this video, though, because you're trying to learn more about how to use the BDP in the first place, you probably will want to avoid that network share. It's also shared the drive that is attached to the BDP, and we'll go over that in a moment. The DLNA server, so again, the BDP, you connect your music to it and it plays it. Turning on the DLNA server, which is restricted to the BDP2 hardware or better, will allow you to make those music files available to other devices that are DLNA capable or UPnP capable. The DLNA client is another way to add music files to MPD or to your BDP for audio playback. This feature, this way of connecting the BDP to your NAS is a little hit or miss. It depends greatly on how the DLNA server at the other end is configured, whether it pre-caches a database, or if it has to kind of refigure out where all the files are each time a request is made. Will determine A, how quickly it reacts, and if there are any kind of links that would cause the BDP to end up in an endless loop. Could cause, well, the BDP to essentially slow right down and then really not be too terribly responsive. This is the only feature that if you turn on, will not, if you turn the BDP off and then back on, it will no longer be on. USB mount. This piece of software is what makes it possible so that when you plug a USB drive into the BDP, that the BDP then sees that drive. So realistically, it's something you want to leave on. Service mode, not quite sure why that's on right at the moment. But if you're having difficulties with the BDP and need our help, there's a very good chance we'll ask you to turn on service mode. When you do, you'll get a little number that will pop up right here. You should email us that number along with a brief description of the problem you're having, and that will allow us to remote into your BDP and to get a better idea of what's wrong and how to fix it. SharePlay. So SharePlay is a open source project designed to emulate AirPlay. In the year or so Manic Moose has been around, it's had reasonably good review from customers that use it. But basically, you turn it on, and whatever's playing on your iPad, your iPhone, or your Mac, the BDP will play it. I guess I would say the biggest disadvantage to using this over an official AirPlay device is if you're watching, say, video, the sound likely won't be in sync with the video. In addition, there are also two Squeezebox renderers. So if you're using the Squeezebox server and client software, you could turn the BDP into a SqueezeLite renderer using either one of these services. As far as I'm aware, they both work pretty well the same. It's just that they're just two different projects that do the same thing. We incorporated one, someone requested the second, so we eventually released a software update that included the second one. And finally, we come to the DLNA renderer, which, if turned on, will allow the BDP to act as a DLNA or UPnP renderer. So if you want to use JRiver, you want to use this as the BDP as the destination for JRiver, turning this feature on would allow for that. Okay, so next is the Bradio function. Bradio is a web interface that interfaces with Shoutcast.com. Shoutcast.com is a database of streaming radio stations. It's fairly straightforward. You select a genre, then you select a subgenre, or you just select all the stations. In this case, we'll go with Celtic. And then it lists off all the stations that fall under that selection. To play a station is fairly simple. You just click it, and it starts playing. Yeah. Don't know why these plus buttons weren't showing a second ago, but basically they allow you to favorite a radio station. So now that I've favorited that radio station, if I go back to the dashboard and then back into Bradio, there it is. I can just click it and it starts playing it. Well, we can hold everything for so it's fairly straightforward. The radio stations are listed by the most number of listeners. Last played, if it's available, bit rate. You probably won't want to go anything lower than 128. and then the name of the station. Finally, we come to the media player interface, which is kind of the meat and potatoes of the Manic Moose interface. Before we get started, though, I've got both a BDP2 here and a BDP1 USB. So before getting into the interface, just going to take a look at some statistics. So again, both these units are running a test build of the firmware, which we can see it's a test build here as it ends with an odd number, in this case 17. If it was a stable release, it would be a even numbered value, in which case, so basically what this means is anything you see in here should be in the stable release of S2.18 or newer. So the BDP2 has nearly 29,000 songs attached to it. The BDP1 just a shade fewer. That's because the BDP2 has an internal hard drive with some music on it. That's the difference. So we'll go back to the BDP2 here, and we'll go to the media player interface. This is it. This is what it looks like on a desktop computer. If I shrink this, we'll refresh. This is what it would look like on a small tablet, and this is what it would look like on a smartphone. I'm just going to blow it back up here. Go over it. So the update button, you would tell the BDP to update the database. We have our seek bar, our transport controls, settings for media player. So anytime where it needs to make a decision of which artist, you can tell the BDP to use the artist tag or the album artist tag. This first option here, use file names over tag data, really is useful when you're dealing with non-line characters. Maybe you have something that's written in Cantonese. You may want to use that option. Show song resolution. So just close this. Over here, this is your music library by the file folder structure of the drives. So you can tell the BDP to list the song resolutions. It's a bit slower to list music files because it's actually got to check to see what the resolution is for each music file, but it'll give you that information. So maybe you want to try and compare a 44K song to a 96K song. It'll tell you which is which before adding it to the library. This will go after a bit later. This basically just, if you have really long song names or album names, this will just make them scroll. And this, say you copy some music to one of the drives over the network, and you don't want to do a global update and wait for anything. If you turn this on, it'll list any files that aren't in the music database. Crossfade, we'll just add a crossfade when the song ends and another song begins. The songs have to be matching resolution. If you go from 44K to 96K, for instance, and you set this for 5 seconds, you'll just have 5 seconds of silence. Cover art name priority. Basically, whenever you're playing back music or listing music, this will tell the BDP which picture file to use if there's more than one picture file. Basically, in this case, picture file named folder would take the highest priority, then the next highest priority would be cover, and then third highest priority would be front. If none of those names exist, it just uses the first one in alphabetical order. So to navigate your library is relatively straightforward, I would say. So we'll go with music on WD MyCloud, which is the my NAS. Again, 28,000, nearly 29,000 songs, so there's quite a few artists, so it takes half a second to load. We'll just show that on the BDP2, assuming it's, yeah, there it is. As you can see, it did take a few seconds longer. Again, that's kind of the speed difference between the hardware of the BDP2 versus the one. So the Key9 viewer may have noticed this here. What is this for? Well, this basically just kind of lets you jump further down. So say you wanted to jump to the ends. This will take me all the way to the ends, and I can oh, yeah, there we go. It's a name I vaguely recognize. So clicking the folder name will take you into that folder. If you go back, it takes you right back to where you entered in this case, Neil Young. If we wanted to add, say, this entire contents of this folder after the Gold Rush, we can just click this plus button, and it adds all of the contents. It tells you how many songs are in the playlist, in this case 11. Otherwise, we could go into the folder and add songs individually. In this case, Oh Lonesome Me. We click the plus button, that increases. Oh, I must have double clicked it. And there it is. We'll just try that again. See, there we go. There. Single click, adds once. Double click, we'll add it twice. And if we go back, again, it'll leave us right back at Neil Young, so we can go further down. 9 Inch Nails. We'll add this. There it goes. If we want to, we could rearrange these. Rearranged. Yeah, we'll just clear this. Yeah, if we go back. Relatively straightforward. Click the song, tell it to start playing. Now this is on NAS, so the NAS goes to sleep occasionally, so it takes half a sec to get back up and running, but there it goes. And yeah, it'll just play through. Now that the NAS is up and running, though, it should just go from song to song. We'll fast forward through this one. Should be gapless. There we go, 36, 37. It's already started up the next track. Actually, let's just add that back in. So this button here, Song View, just lists off the current playlist, but using up the entire width of the screen. So we'll go over some of the playback function here. There's consume, loop, and shuffle. So loop is pretty straightforward. When it gets to the end of the last song, it will just go back to the top and start over again, as we'll see here in half a sec. Then we have the shuffle function, which will tell the BDP to shuffle the contents. Now, if you want to ensure that only one song plays and doesn't play a second time, just turn on consume. What this will do is when it's done playing that song, it'll remove it from the playlist. It doesn't remove it from your library, just from the playlist. So we should see Serve the Servants disappear, and so it has. You can see it's moved on to the next song, which didn't seem too random to me, but it is turned on because the next track is going to be Francis Farmer, whatchamahave there. So that's the consume, loop, and shuffle features. Go back here. So you can also perform a search of your library. It's handled here. So if you just type in a search term, it'll search for that word or name in the track, album, or artist. When you get the results back, you can either add tracks individually by clicking the plus button, or by clicking the title, it will add the entire contents of the search result. You can also narrow the search criteria to artist or album. And again, it works the same way. You can either add tracks individually or the entire search results. And again, same thing for album. In addition to the search function, there's also an artist view. Now this view does rely on a database to be built. So every time you update the library, it will need to go through this process here. This very recently in this testing build, we've made significant changes to this feature. So it is now quite a bit faster. Benchmarking this particular library, it used to take a BDP1 22 minutes to build this database. It took a BDP2, which is what I'm running this on, nearly 7 minutes. The new firmware for BDP2 should see an improvement of down around 2.5 minutes. Whereas a BDP1 sees nearly a 4 times improvement, or a 1/4, takes nearly a quarter of the time to now build this particular database, which will sort your music into various categories by genre, artist, album artist, even the type of file it's encoded as. So yeah, if you're watching this before the S2.18 firmware is available, it won't be nearly as fast as what we're witnessing now. And again, if the smaller your library is, the less time it'll take. So again, this library is 29,000 songs large. If your library is half that, then it will take about half the time to build. If it's twice as big, it'll take about twice as long. Again, it's kind of one of the downsides of having a huge library, is it does take longer to sort through it. Whether that be building this database or just scrolling past artists that you're trying to get past. I also should say, while it's doing this, it's also going to be trying to optimize the cover art as well. Because I've already been through this process a number of times with this database of audio, or this library of music files, it doesn't have to stop for that, so that is also going to add time. But it's one of those things, once it's done it once, it doesn't have to do it again. So when it's done, you should get this message in the middle here, and a list of artists should arrive on your left. Now again, this is a case of if it doesn't look quite the way, like if you think you're missing artists, this is a case where if you go into the media player settings and change this from artist to album artist, save it, then reset the DB, close this. Next time you load this page, it'll rebuild it, and instead of going by the artist tag, it'll go by the album artist tag. Now, as I mentioned before, we are making significant changes to how this works. And there's still one or two things to work out. Like, for instance, this ABBA, selecting the ABBA artist, I only have the one album. It's showing fine. But if I go to, I think it's AC/DC will do this to me, because I have 9 albums. I think I should get doubles. Oh no, it seems to be working pretty good. So this is pretty straightforward. So at the top, when you select an artist, you'll have some quick stacks, or, well, number of albums, number of songs. If you hit play, it's going to add all 9 albums, all 96 songs to the current playlist, and start playing them in order. Clicking the shuffle button does the same thing, but it turns on the shuffle mode. So if we clear this, we'll click it, shuffle's been turned on, same thing as before, starts playing, but it's just playing somewhere in the middle. So we clear this, and basically these buttons are the equivalent to the individual albums, but they apply to that particular album. So in this case, Highway to Hell, hit the play button, adds all of Highway to Hell, starts playing it. Clicking individual tracks are a little bit different. Basically it adds it to the library, or sorry, to the playlist, and then immediately starts playing it. So yeah, and now that we've built the Bryston database, if we go back to the default view. Okay, so yeah, so back on the default view, we have these 4 folders here, which essentially, once the Bryston database has been created, allows you to view your music library by genre, artist, album artist. And it works just like navigating your music library by the file folder structure. So we can either click the plus button and add all of pop. There it is. Or you can click on pop, and we can be more specific about what we're adding.
I have a note back from Ann on those,
And again, clicking the title here will add the entire contents. Actually, let's pop all that back in there. Clicking back takes you back a single level. Clicking back and holding it takes you all the way back to the home area. Over here we have a save button, which allows us to save this playlist. If we go into playlists, we see that we have some stuff. So we clear this, click this, there's our playlist. If you want to remove a playlist, it's just a matter of dragging it to the middle, and it's gone. And I think that about wraps everything up here.